Welcome to Liberty Matters. My name is Dan Liddicott, and with me today is Scott Neville, who is very involved in what is happening in the Libertarian Party at the moment. Thank you for joining us, Scott.
Good evening, Dan. It's a pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to have you here. When I say that you're very involved in what's happening in the Libertarian Party at the moment, I realise that that's a little bit of an understatement. Do you want to tell us a bit about what you actually do for the party?
So my official role, one of my official roles is that I'm the Data Protection Officer, which means I'm responsible for looking after the party's data. But that's really quite minor for what I do for the actual party. So I do a lot of standing for elections and helping people that want to stand for elections. So I've now stood for election for the Libertarian Party twice, once in the general election, which was in 2017, and once in the local elections in 2018. I'm proud to say that I have the highest number of votes ever achieved at a general election for the party, and the highest number of votes and percentage of votes in a local election for the party.
Yes, you have. That's a really wonderful achievement, one that we've just been celebrating over the last few days. I know that. So what I'm really interested in is you talk about how you obviously help a lot of people as well. So we're going to come on to your campaigning and your standing for election later. What's your role within the party for helping other candidates?
So I help them out with the electoral paperwork. I mean, a lot of the time people don't realise how much bureaucracy is involved in actually standing for election. There's a silly amount of paperwork. There's various different forms which largely ask the same information in different ways. And there's things like on the, let's say, party description. As a party, we have to have registered descriptions. But in that box, you do not put the party description. So it's a minefield of paperwork for people that don't know and haven't been through the system before. So I help them out, fill that out. I also get involved with the running of the meetups, and I also get involved with the running of the conference, which happens once a year. So yeah, I tend to meet quite a lot of people.
I can imagine. So who particularly were you dealing with in the local elections last week?
So with the local elections, I was helping out Aidan, who was in Suffolk, Sean in Bromley, Josh in Bradford, and James in Worcester were the other candidates I was helping out. And I was sending emails out pretty much every week, just letting them know that at this point in the campaign, you need to be doing this for the electoral office because they'll expect this piece of paperwork completed by this date. These are what you need to do. These are the things you need to understand when completing these pieces of paperwork. And yeah, pretty much every week I was sending out different bits saying, look, this is how you get ready for the count. This is the paperwork you need to submit to attend the count. Here's how you invite other people to the count. And if there was any issues that people would ask me about, like what's the best way to campaign, how do you actually canvass, how do you collect the information needed to canvass, and also dealing with all sorts of questions, because one of the things that people that don't actually stand for election don't realise is the amount of weird questions and weird things that you get asked about and asked to get involved in when you go out and talk to people. I mean, probably the weirdest thing that I've ever been asked is what does Brexit mean for the transfer of international football players to the UK? and seriously, that was this person's most important point about Brexit. And,
Interesting.
And his views on Brexit were shaped about how, I think he was a Saints fan, how Southampton could transfer international quality football players post-Brexit.
Interesting stuff. So, but this is what you're meeting on the doorstep. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, so it's just on the doorstep out generally, because obviously when you're going around, you talk to anyone that's milling about in the ward or the constituency. Everyone there has got an opinion. Everyone's got a voice, and it's worth speaking to as many different people as possible. But yeah, a lot of these conversations have happened on the doorstep. Yeah, there's been all sorts of strange ones, even from the shape of the green recycling bins and how they're not conducive to older people. Now, obviously,
okay,
I'm not...
you can see how that would be relevant to someone. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, but my experience of the shape of bins is limited. I'm going to admit that.
So what you're saying is the candidates are often looked at as potential experts on everything.
Yes, yeah, you do have to know a lot of random things, and you are asked all sorts. I mean, I've also had people say, "Oh, libertarian," and this person was a language expert. Said that sounds very French. I mean, that's probably going to cost you a few votes because it's French.
I see, but most people wouldn't have seen it that way. I guess.
No, I've never seen it that way. I've looked up what the definition meant, and I fit that definition. I'm happy with that, and that's really it for me. I've never really looked any more from the root origin of the word. But yeah, as I say, candidates are generally expected to be experts on absolutely everything. People ask all sorts of strange things, and they expect you to be as knowledgeable as they are. And that can be quite challenging. People don't realise that. I mean, it's great fun because you get to learn all sorts of strange things that you would never really come across in real life. I mean, I even ended up learning about the architecture of the station in Basingstoke because I met someone who worked for the train company that operates that train station. And they were talking about how privatisation was a good thing, which I agreed with them, although I'm not completely convinced on the exact method of privatisation of the railways. And because they were talking about the amount of money that South West Trains had put in to refurbish the station, and they'd done a good job with bringing it up to date, but maintaining some of the 19th century architecture and styling throughout the building, but still having all the modern facilities and Wi-Fi throughout the station, etc. And this was all done through private money. But obviously, you know, these are things that on day one, when you start getting involved in politics, you don't actually know much about them.
I get you.
But you learn pretty quick.
So a lot of people listening to this will be themselves Libertarian Party members who are contemplating that in the next round of elections, they will want to stand and represent the party. So what you're telling me sounds like there might be a few little pitfalls. What advice would you give to these people?
My advice is very simple. First thing is do it. Stand for election, because there is no experience quite like it. You walk into the polling booth on polling day after working really, really hard for 6-7 weeks, and obviously working out for the months previous for that as well. And then you see your name on the ballot paper and you think, crikey, this is real. I'm doing something that such a few number of people will ever do. I'm adding to the real debate in society, and it really hits you at that point when you see your own name, your own address on that ballot paper. It's indescribable how good that feels. So my first suggestion is just do it, and is to stick true to what you believe in. You're never going to be an expert on everything, so just don't try. As long as you stick to your same moral principles and you listen to what people have to say, you try and understand and sympathise with the problems that they're having, because everyone's got problems. I mean, it's ludicrous to suggest that there's people in this world that don't have any single problems at all. Everyone has different issues. You try and sympathise and understand and think about how a libertarian government or a libertarian council can do something to solve those problems, not necessarily by the council actually doing something or the state actually doing something, but by returning power to the community, or devolving power, or giving direct control over certain things back to people, or simply getting out of the way. There's so many little things that can be done to really improve people's lives. I mean, one example that we actually had in the local elections was parking. I actually did a long video on it where I waffled for quite a bit. But in Brighton Hill, which is the ward I stood in, there was a lot of houses that were built in sort of the mid-80s, and they came with enough space to park one single car. Obviously, times have changed, and all the families have multiple cars now. Now, the Basingstoke and Dean Borough Council actually have a programme to allocate more parking spaces to all these different roads where they're struggling for parking. Now, there's about 400 different roads across the borough on this scheme, and over the past 4 years, they've taken care of 30 roads. Half of which they've said there's nothing we can do about it, and half of which they've actually done something. But the point is, for someone who's at position 400, you're going to be saying to them, look, you know, under this current scheme, it's going to take ages for you to get anywhere near the top. You're not going to see it in this term, the next term of the council, probably the next term after that. It's just not going to happen. You're going to be waiting 20 years. So how can a libertarian way of doing things actually improve this situation? And I've thought about this, and I thought, well, the obvious answer is simple. Why don't we encourage the formation of residents' committees and get the residents that live there themselves to actually take some ownership of this problem and design what they think should be done to improve the parking with the public resources that are available. They can put that to their own residents to get approval. They can go out to a private company. They can find out how much the costing is, and then they can submit that to the council and say, look, we pay our council tax for this sort of thing. We've taken all the bureaucracy out of it for you. Just do this. The planning's already been done. The costing's already been done. All the work's been done. And it's obviously going to get approval by the people that live there because it's been done by the people that live there for the people that live there. So the council's effectively just getting out the way and effectively spending their taxpayers' money on something they're instructed to do. Now, my preference going forward would be that rather than having the council take that money and then give it back to them through this kind of mechanism, that they just did it themselves anyway, because then that can just be done and it's a lot quicker.
Yes, of course.
But obviously, I've got to convince in Basingstoke and Deane 59 other councillors that that's a good idea. So that's a long shot. But, getting the community involved to do it and just presenting the council with something, here we go, here's a solution, it works, and then getting them to spend money that they were going to spend anyway on just doing it, means that it can actually get done, it can get done quickly, and there's no bureaucratic nonsense that's involved with the actual running of the council in the way. It's just residents wanting to improve their own lives, getting out there, doing it, and just everyone getting on.
Fantastic. And of course the advantage with that is that each of the different sort of areas or related roads can be doing it simultaneously.
Exactly. You're effectively...
Whereas you would be in a queue of one at a time with the council because of their resources.
Exactly. So you can effectively have 500 people working on this problem in small little chunks rather than one person sat in an office who's got no attachment to the area, no interest in doing it because they have no personal attachment. Whereas all the people that will be doing it through this kind of mechanism really want it to be the best they can because they're so connected to it. And
that's right. It's on their doorstep. They're going to want it to be good. They're going to want it to work, to have longevity.
Exactly. So these sorts of issues, I think a libertarian way of doing things is going to actually do a lot to improve the quality of people's lives. And it is following libertarian principles. It's just not the standard sort of thing you see on the internet with people shouting taxation is theft or Second Amendment rights or free speech. It's a slightly different way of looking at the same principles, but actually using the mechanisms in play to make people's lives better through a libertarian way of doing things. And obviously, as this kind of thing would work and gain credibility, then that means people are going to give more support to our other ideas. So, Rome wasn't built in a day. We're not going to click our fingers and be able to win an entire election and switch to a completely libertarian way of doing things overnight.
Sure. But what you're showing is you're demonstrating very clearly there, Scott, demonstrating with the ideas that you're putting forward that the answer is there within libertarianism. Often it is a criticism that somehow, under libertarian government, it's going to turn into some kind of Mad Max dystopia. But that's the caricature, isn't it? And what you're saying is absolutely not. Libertarianism is a pragmatic, practical view of politics.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, you do get people that will say, the market will provide. And okay, I don't disagree with that statement, but fundamentally, you need to start on a basis where you can say to people, "Look, this will work. Here is how it will work," and then you can go from there. And
it works by getting out of the way, really, so that local people can deal with the things that matter to them in the way that actually helps them.
Exactly, that's 100% it.
Brilliant. That sounds absolutely wonderful. And as you talk to people about this kind of approach, what sort of response do you get?
To begin with, you sometimes get a little bit of a confusion and a little bit of a strange look. But when you talk about it a bit more, people start to think, yeah, actually, this guy knows what he's talking about. This guy's right. And it actually bridges so many other gaps as well. So I had a really long conversation with a lady in the ward. And she was an ardent Remain voter, and I was obviously a Brexiteer. I'm a libertarian. I want power to be devolved to as low as possible. But because we talked about these general ideas about how, by giving people ownership in their problems, and ownership over their lives, they take more care of them. They're more interested in fixing their problems. She was a big advocate of one of the charities, St Michael's Hospice, in Basingstoke. And because she realised that, we were basically going on the right principles that give people ownership over their own lives and they'll take more care of it, we actually ended up getting on really, really well. And I'm hoping that she actually went out and voted for me. But because of that and these principles and actually, this idea of working together and just getting things that don't work out the way, the whole EU issue was fine. We were both quite happy, and that it wasn't a problem between an ardent Leaver and an ardent Remainer.
No, and often we have so much more in common than we think when we sort of get out from the labels and actually have a discussion.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I hate labels. I mean, whatever you want to label me, I don't really care, because I'm me. I'm an individual, and that's all that matters. And I think, yeah, for most people, we have so much more in common once we get past these silly little badges that we stick on ourselves.
And that's really interesting. So, taking off this theme of being an individual rather than a label, often an arbitrary label that someone else is applying to you, I'm interested to know then how you came to be a libertarian. What was your journey?
Well, I started off a bit supporting the Conservative Party. The first sort of campaign I got involved in to any extent was a William Hague Save the Pound campaign, which I think was 2002. That was a disaster pretty much, because I didn't get anywhere. And I sort of went into the wilderness for a little while. I sort of considered myself a socialist for a little while, because I argued that if two people did the same job, they should be getting paid the same. And I considered myself a socialist then, and then that didn't really fit, because I was for property rights and people having ownership of things, because I think they care for things a bit more. And I got disowned by other socialist friends, so I left that. And then I was in the wilderness for a long time, and I thought, there's nothing really that reflects what I believe in. There's nothing out there. The Conservatives aren't there anymore. Labour's definitely not there. There's a few bits of the Green that are all right, a few bits of the Liberal Democrats that are all right, but there's nothing else there. So I wrote down everything that I thought I believed in, and I went Googling. I came across online this guy called Ron Paul, who few people might have heard of.
Ron Paul is responsible, I think, for 90% of people who are libertarian choosing to be libertarian. But sorry, yes. I interrupted. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. I mean, I quite agree with that. And I watched some of his videos, and I thought, yes, this guy is right. I like this guy. I agree with him. And I looked at what he stands for, and he basically called himself a libertarian. I was like, oh, what the heck's this? And I looked it up on Wikipedia, I think, and I went through it, and I'm like, yeah, this sounds pretty good. I'm not completely convinced on the gun ownership thing. My sort of feelings are a little bit more nuanced on that than most people would think. I don't disagree that it's wrong for me to enforce my views on someone else. So I don't think people should be denied them. I just think our focus should be on minimising the crime involvement rather than worrying about legalising or criminalising gun owners. But anyway, and then as a bit more Googling, I found the Libertarian Party in the United Kingdom, and I thought, what the heck, time to put your money where your mouth is. Sign up, and that was very early 2015 when I signed up with the Libertarian Party, and then it just went from there. I went to the first conference that we had. It was quite a quiet affair. I think there was about 12 of us there. And then at that point I thought, I wonder what I've signed up for here. But then the next conference I went to, there was probably over 100 people there, and it's just gone from there, just going from strength to strength. So what do you think then is behind the sort of momentum that is building in the Libertarian Party in the UK? I think people are realising that a lot of the things that they're being sold are not quite as black and white as they're being sold as. So a lot of people have been saying that the Labour Party and the socialist ideas are for fairness and for equality, and people are sort of realising that life's a little bit more complicated than that. And just because someone belongs to one particularly arbitrary group doesn't implicitly make them disadvantaged or advantaged. So they're going, well, hang on a minute, this is nonsense. And they're looking at the Conservative Party going, and they're sort of becoming very authoritarian and a little bit dictatorial. They're making a shambles of Brexit as well. And they're sort of going, well, these people aren't right either. And then they look at some of the other parties, like the Liberal Democrats, and go, well, hang on, we want decisions to be made by us. I mean, why are they supporting the EU? Surely a Democrat should be following the will of the people. And they're not in, and they're losing their interest as well. So I think the momentum is coming from the younger generation, which is realizing that all of the sort of hard and fast truths are not quite hard and fast as they thought they were, and that life is just a little bit more variety, has a little bit more variety and a little bit more spice to it than these random groupings that the left seem to love are about. So life is complicated, life is varied, and the only way to sort of deal with that is to actually treat everything as it comes on an individualistic level, because there's no two people that are the same. And I think that, in many ways the left is actually to thank for that, because they're the ones bigging up the rights for or back in the day, the early 90s and late 80s, they were the ones bigging up the rights for people who are homosexual, people that can have what's the word I'm looking for? Gender non-binary. Now, again, I don't agree with any of those labels. I think if the only label that matters is you're an individual, you're you. But they're the ones that sort of made people realise that there's more to life and to the world we live in than what would have been traditionally portrayed as a heterosexual couple or various different religions, man and woman. So that's brought that into the limelight a little bit. But then they've gone down this route of everyone's got to be in their little box, and because they've sown this little seed, people have gone, well, hang on a minute, if it's not right to box people at this higher level, which you've pointed out on the left, why is it now right to box people into this lower level? That's wrong as well, surely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So they've sowed the seeds of their own destruction, to quote Karl Marx.
That's right. What they've done is that they're trying to break the old mold, or open the door to the cage, but only to have a different cage on the other side of the door.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that's driving a lot of people to this very, very pro-individualistic way of looking at things. And if you're going to be that individualistic, then you have to sort of look at it and say, well, as long as someone's not hurting anyone, then who am I to say what they can and can't do? And of course, that leads very nicely onto libertarianism, because that is exactly the libertarian philosophy. If you're not hurting anyone, I have absolutely no place in telling you how to live your life.
Yeah, that's a fantastic journey that you've taken there. Did you experience any rejection as a result of moving politically in the way you have?
Not really, no. I mean, I know exactly what you mean, though, because when I first sort of properly discovered Ron Paul and I got into it, and I was sort of getting involved in the movement, I sort of looked at it and thought, I've discovered it. I know what can make society happy now. I understand. Everything is clear. It's amazing. It's freedom. I want to give it to you. It's amazing. And everyone sort of looks at me like, you're completely crazy.
They look at you and they say, but who will build the roads?
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I didn't have any, I didn't fall out with any friends over it. I've had one or two disown me over the EU referendum, but not specifically libertarianism. But you think when you first go into it, it's like, yes, this is the perfect combination. I'm going to be loved by the left and by the right. And what actually happens is you're hated by the left and by the right. So instead of pleasing everyone, you disappoint everyone. But fortunately, most of my friends are pretty they're pretty cool with whatever goes. I mean, they might not believe in libertarian ideas politically, but they certainly agree with the idea that they have no business controlling how I live my life. So most of them are fairly supportive, and they say as long as you're doing what you genuinely think is right, then they have no objection with me. I would never ever dream of disowning a friend over politics. I mean, if it's that bad, we'll just choose not to talk about it. It's as simple as that for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure for many people, that is the rule around the dinner table. No football and no politics.
Yeah, that's definitely true in our house. None of us like football.
Fair enough. And that's the beauty of a libertarian world. We can each have our own interests, and that's fine.
Yeah, exactly.
So, looking ahead, you've been on a bit of a journey. You've embraced libertarianism. You've found a home in the Libertarian Party. You've stood twice in elections and got very good results both times. What do you see in the future for libertarianism in the UK and for the party?
I think this I don't think this movement is going to go away anytime soon. I mean, from what I've read of reports on supposedly this Generation Z, which I'm not, again, it's a label, I'm not particularly fond of it, but it seems that there is, it is almost like the counterculture, the new hip movement that's sort of coming through people that are going through college and university now. So I think the movement is going to grow tremendously. I think the Libertarian Party actually has some very good prospects going forward, because obviously we're open. We've got plenty of spaces for candidates to join in and get involved. I've already had several people contact me about standing in next year's local elections. I can only see that growing because people want to be able to challenge the mainstream, and it's typically the younger generation that sort of are aware to how bad some of the mainstream parties are, and they're not happy with it, and they feel kind of like I do, which is if you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything. So I think our prospects are actually going to be really good, and I can see us standing more and more candidates every year until a point when we actually start getting television interviews properly. We end up on Daily Politics and in some of the TV debates, almost like UKIP did. I think we can rise to that kind of level where UKIP was at. And where it will go from there, I don't know, because I mean, I think if effectively all the main parties, which are somewhat authoritarian in nature, see a Libertarian Party rise to that kind of level, they're going to buck their ideas up damn quick, because they're going to say effectively, okay, I'm an authoritarian. My challenges are authoritarians, and libertarians. So effectively, if half the people are authoritarians and half the people are libertarians, there's 4 of them competing for the same set of half the population. So I think with that, that some of them are going to buck their ideas up tremendously, and it's going to be very quick. What that will actually mean for the party, I don't know. What it will mean for the UK on the whole is going to be very, very positive, because I think the debate is going to be opened up, and there's going to be much more willingness to talk about protecting the freedoms that all individuals supposedly currently enjoy. Particularly, so I say supposedly because obviously we've got the Count Dankula thing ongoing at the moment, and free speech. There is a few question marks over that in the UK, and it was good to see that there was some activism over the weekend. I'm not particularly a fan of some of the characters that are involved in that, but I do support their right to speak their mind, and I think that I do support them in that standing up for the right of someone else to speak their mind, even if I don't agree with what they're actually saying.
Absolutely. And you've said to me before that it's controversial ideas that need the right, the right to speak them being defended. The run-of-the-mill ideas don't need any defence because everyone's happy with those.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the right to be controversial.
Well, that's the other beautiful thing. If you look at the rise and fall of the British National Party, the thing that actually killed them was being able to debate their ideas, because it turned out that they have absolutely no consistency in anything they say, other than that they hate all people that are not British, pretty much. It seemed to me that they're not particularly fond of them. Their ideas on economics, their ideas on domestic policy, security, trade, all inconsistent with different members of the party, and people were able to see that. And by getting them out and saying, look, here are our ideas, everyone can see they're rubbish.
That's right. Let bad ideas be spoken, and then we can tear them apart in the public square.
Yeah, if for example, there are people that are racists out there. I'm sure there are people that are racist somewhere in the UK. I don't think there's quite as many as might be led to believe, but I'm definitely sure there's 1 or 2 out there. Let's hear them. Let's hear from them. Let's not have those ideas be driven underground where they can fester and grow and go unchallenged. Let's get them out there, and let's have everyone ridicule how ridiculous they are, and that will kill them, because people will look at them and say, well, this is ridiculous, rather than being a very underground movement. If you've been excluded from society for whatever reason, then this is the movement for you, because it's underground and it's controversial and it's against the political elite. Then that's going to gain some traction, and those kind of underground networks will grow. I mean, you only have to look at how organised crime works. And it's part of it is the excitement of being this underground organisation that drives people to it. Part of it is the money, and part of it is the lack of opportunity. But it's the same for ideas. The ideas need to be brought out so they can be challenged openly, and bad ideas can be finished off.
Absolutely. And there's been a bit of movement in the press which suggests, certainly some commentators seem to think so, that that free speech is a right-wing ideal. What do you say to them?
It depends what you consider right-wing, I suppose.
That's always the problem with that the left-right dichotomy to us as libertarians is complete nonsense, Yeah,
I mean, if you were to look at it as a collectivist versus individualist, with individualism on the right and collectivism on the left, then yes, in that regard, it is a right-wing idea. But you have to accept in that Hitler was a far-left icon.
Yeah, which they're never going to do, are they?
You're never going to accept that.
It's really just a slur, then, isn't it? They're just trying to say right wing equals bad. Therefore, if I call you right wing, you must also be bad, or something ridiculous like that.
Exactly. Yeah. So I don't think it's. I mean, I think I would actually say that the sort of political debate is even more than the square that organisations like Political Compass follow, where they've got the authority versus liberty and left versus right, where they look at left and right in purely economics, and authority and liberty in terms of social policy. I think there's another angle to it, so it's almost a cube where you've got progressive and regressive, because you can want to move forward in a free way, and you can also want to move backwards in a free way. So I think it really is an authority versus liberty thing. It's not really a left and right issue, and I actually don't think you can be far right and pro liberty. Like I don't think you can be far left and pro liberty. Equally, I don't think you can be highly dictatorial and far right and far left, because it doesn't make sense. If you have absolute power and you can decide anything, then you can't be right wing and you can't be left wing, because it doesn't matter in terms of economics if you've got a free market or a completely controlled market, simply because if you can decide anything, then it's not a free market. It's your will, but it's not controlled in any way. It's whatever arbitrary nonsense you spout out.
That's right.
Equally, if you've got a completely free society, you can't have a planned economy, and you can't enforce a truly free market economy, because if people decide that they want to have a controlled economy in a particular area, you can't stop them, because that's the whole point of it being a free society.
Absolutely. So left and right then, whatever that happens to mean at the time, then becomes an individual choice rather than a top-down imposition.
Yes, exactly.
Brilliant. Which is exactly as it should be, as libertarians would all around the world tell you. Just to sort of bring this episode of Liberty Matters to a close, let's take it back to the elections again. We're expecting, as a young but growing party, to have lots of new candidates for the local elections next year. What can a new candidate expect to have by way of support and assistance from the party to put their minds at rest? Okay,
so the first thing that we will offer is we'll offer a load of training on the actual mechanics of standing for an election, which is involved in going to the electoral office, what you do, etc., etc. We will also offer you a load of training on how you can actually canvass. Obviously, we want your ideas, but there's certain mechanics for running a successful campaign which will get people involved and obviously get you volunteers. We will do all that. When it actually comes down to it, we will send you out regular advice on how to complete the various bits of paperwork. If we can, we might even be able to get you an agent. It depends on what staff we've got available, because the elections in the UK, everyone has to have an election agent, and the election agent is responsible effectively for the legalities of your campaign. Now, in most cases, people run as their own agent. But if we can provide you with an agent, we will do that, and they will look after all the paperwork for you. All you have to worry about is campaigning. We have a system where we've got details of volunteers. We go out to our meetups. We collect the names of volunteers that people were happy to come out, but they're not party members. Obviously, any party members, they can sign up to say, look, I'm happy to go out volunteering. We will put you in touch with volunteers that are in your area that are happy to come out. So it shouldn't be a thing where you go out on your own and you just go and speak to people. We want you to go out in a group. There is a bit of a joke that a lot of British politics is done in the pub, and that the canvassing normally starts on the basis of we go to this pub for breakfast, then we go out and do a bit of canvassing, then we go to this pub for lunch, then we go out and do a bit of canvassing, and then we go to this pub for dinner. But, you know, we do want it to be a social event, so we will get you the volunteers that we can, and we'll ask as many people as we can to get involved with your campaign to help you out. We'll obviously support you with all the paperwork, and we'll provide graphics designs for your leaflets. So all you have to do is effectively tell us the key things that you want to stand for. We'll sort out the graphics for you. We'll also put you online. We'll set you up a Facebook page, an official party Facebook page if you want that. Local elections don't tend to be fought so much online. That's more of a ground level thing, so they're less important. But if it's something you want to do, then let us know and we can do that for you as well. And hopefully we'll get you some volunteers at the count, and we'll tell you what goes on at all these different events. And yeah, we'll hopefully make it as an enjoyable experience as possible. But I really can't stress enough about how much fun it can be talking to people about how different ideas can actually do something to fix the problems that they've been harping on about for years.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And hopefully anyone listening who is thinking of standing in next year's elections, please don't delay. Please contact us at party headquarters and let us know of your intention to stand. There's lots of support available. And Scott will be one of those people supporting you. He's been a real force of nature over the last 2 elections that we've had candidates in. He's going to be your best friend.
You're too kind. Most people call me a troublemaker.
There's a fine line between the two. Well, Scott, thank you.
I'm very much looking forward to the next elections, because it's a great time to go out and spread the ideas of liberty, and you get to hear so many interesting stories, and there's so much to learn, and it's such an enjoyable atmosphere. I mean, because you feel like you're actually doing something to help people and to make people's lives better, while, you know, staying true to your own beliefs. It's something I cannot recommend enough that people do.
Thank you, Scott. That's a perfect note to finish on. Thank you for joining us.
You're very welcome. It's been a pleasure to be here.
And to everyone out there, this is Liberty Matters. My name's Dan Liddicott, interviewing Scott Neville for the Libertarian Party.